You've tried everything. You've set alarms, made lists, promised yourself this time would be different. You've watched the motivational videos, read the productivity books, downloaded the apps that were supposed to change your life. And for a few days, maybe even a week, something inside you actually believed it would work. You felt that spark, that rush of possibility, that feeling that finally you'd figured it out. But then, without warning, it all collapsed. The energy vanished. The excitement died. And you were back where you started, except now with an extra layer of shame because once again, you couldn't follow through. If this sounds familiar, if you've lived this cycle so many times you've lost count, what I'm about to share might completely reframe the way you see yourself. Because here's the truth that nobody talks about. Motivation isn't supposed to be the engine that runs your life. For most people, it's more like the gasoline, something that helps when it's there, but isn't required for the car to actually move. But if your brain is wired differently, if you're dealing with ADHD or neurodivergence you might not even know about yet, motivation becomes something else entirely. It becomes the only fuel your brain recognizes. And when it runs out, which it always does, everything stops. Not because you're weak, not because you're lazy, but because the part of your brain responsible for starting tasks, maintaining focus, and pushing through boring or difficult things isn't getting the neurochemical signal it needs to function. Let me paint a picture you might recognize. You have something important to do. You know it matters. You know there will be consequences if you don't do it. But when you sit down to start, it's like trying to push a car uphill with no momentum. Your body feels heavy. Your mind wanders to anything else. You check your phone, get water, rearrange your desk, suddenly remember something you meant to look up 3 days ago. And the whole time, there's this voice in your head saying, just do it, just start. What's wrong with you? Why is this so hard? The task itself might take 20 minutes, but the mental battle to begin it drains you for hours. Now contrast that with something you actually find interesting. A new hobby, a video game, a conversation about something you care about, a project that excites you. Suddenly, you have endless energy. You lose track of time. You forget to eat. Hours pass like minutes, and you're completely locked in. People around you might even call you obsessive, and you think, how can I be lazy and obsessive at the same time? How does that make sense? If you're enjoying this and it's hitting close to home, do me a quick favor and hit that subscribe button and drop a like on this video. It actually helps more people find content like this, and honestly, I think a lot of people need to hear it. Here's what's actually happening. Your brain doesn't produce or regulate dopamine the way a neurotypical brain does. Dopamine isn't just about pleasure or reward. It's the chemical that makes your brain decide something is worth doing. It's the signal that says, yes, this task has value. Let's allocate energy and attention to it. In a typical brain, even boring or unpleasant tasks generate enough dopamine to get started because the brain recognizes future consequences, deadlines, or social expectations as meaningful. But in an ADHD brain, or in many neurodivergent brains, that system is underactive. The baseline level of dopamine is lower, and the receptors don't respond as strongly. So unless something is immediately interesting, new, urgent, or emotionally charged, your brain simply doesn't see it as worth the effort. This is why motivation feels so unreliable. You're not failing to generate willpower. You're waiting for your brain to generate a chemical signal that might not come. And when you do feel motivated, when something finally clicks and you get that surge of energy and focus, it's almost always because the task temporarily became interesting or urgent enough to spike your dopamine. But you can't control that. You can't force your brain to find something interesting. So you end up dependent on external pressure, last-minute panic, or the novelty of a brand new system to get anything done. And when those things fade, you crash. What makes this even harder is that nobody sees it. From the outside, you look like someone who's inconsistent, unreliable, someone who gets excited about things and then loses interest. People tell you to just be more disciplined, just push through, just care more. And you start to believe that maybe they're right. Maybe you are the problem. Maybe everyone else has some kind of inner strength you just don't have. But that's not what's happening. What's happening is that you're trying to run a system that requires a specific type of fuel, and you're constantly running on empty. Think about it like this. Imagine you're driving a car, but the fuel gauge is broken. Sometimes the tank is full, and you don't even realize it until you're suddenly flying down the highway at top speed, feeling unstoppable. Other times, the tank is empty, but the gauge still says half full, so you keep trying to drive, confused about why the engine won't turn over. You're not a bad driver. The car just doesn't work the way you've been told it should. And if you spend your whole life thinking the problem is your driving, you'll never look under the hood. Here's another thing that happens. Because you can't rely on internal motivation, you start creating external pressure to force yourself into action. You wait until the deadline is so close that panic kicks in and floods your system with adrenaline and cortisol, which temporarily mimics the dopamine response and gets you moving. Or you overscheduled yourself, pile on commitments, say yes to everything, because the sheer weight of expectation becomes the only thing strong enough to push you forward. And for a while, it works. You get things done. People see you as capable, productive, maybe even high-achieving. But inside, you're exhausted. You're running on fumes. And eventually, your body says no. You hit a wall. You can't get out of bed. You can't focus on anything. The pressure that used to push you forward now just crushes you. This is called burnout, but it's a very specific kind. It's not just being tired from working too hard. It's the result of using stress and urgency as a substitute for the neurochemical regulation your brain should be providing on its own. You've been forcing your nervous system into fight or flight mode just to complete normal tasks, and your body can't sustain that. So it shuts down. And then you feel even worse because now you can't even use panic to get yourself moving anymore. The guilt that comes with this is almost unbearable. You look at other people who seem to just do things, who don't need a crisis or a burst of inspiration to function, and you feel fundamentally broken. You think, why can't I just be normal? Why does everything have to be so hard? You start to internalize the idea that you're lazy, that you lack discipline, that you're not trying hard enough. And that belief becomes a weight you carry everywhere. It affects how you see yourself, how you talk to yourself, how you show up in the world. But here's the shift I want you to make. The problem was never you. The problem is that you've been trying to operate according to rules that don't match how your brain works. You've been told that motivation is a choice, that discipline is just a matter of deciding to do something and then doing it. But for you, it's not. For you, the gap between intention and action is enormous. And it's not because you don't care. It's because the bridge your brain needs to cross that gap is missing pieces. Once you understand that, everything changes. Not because it suddenly becomes easy, but because you stop blaming yourself for something you were never in control of. You stop thinking you're broken and start recognizing that you're working with a different operating system. And once you know that, you can start finding strategies that actually work with your brain instead of against it. This might mean breaking tasks into absurdly small steps, so small they almost feel silly, because your brain needs to see immediate progress to stay engaged. It might mean using timers, body doubling, or accountability partners to create external structure when internal motivation isn't there. It might mean accepting that some things will only get done at the last minute. And that's okay, because the last minute is when your brain finally gets the signal it needs. It might mean being more selective about what you commit to, protecting your energy, saying no more often, because you know you can't run on stress forever. And for some people, it might mean seeking an evaluation, talking to a professional, exploring whether ADHD or another form of neurodivergence has been quietly shaping your entire life without you realizing it. Because when you finally get the right diagnosis, when you finally understand what's been happening, it's not just information. It's permission to stop fighting yourself. You are not lazy. You are not broken. You are not lacking in character or willpower or drive. You have been trying to survive with a brain that experiences the world differently, and you've been doing it without a map, without support, without anyone telling you that the rules you were taught don't apply to you. That's not failure. That's resilience. And now that you know what's really going on, you can finally stop wondering what's wrong with you and start figuring out what actually works for you. The relief that comes with that understanding is hard to describe. It's like spending your whole life thinking you were bad at running, only to discover you've been trying to run with weights strapped to your legs. The weights were always there. You just couldn't see them. And now that you can, you finally understand why everything felt so much harder for you than it seemed to be for everyone else. It wasn't in your head. It was real, and it was never your fault.